Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of UncommonCents. We're at 94 today, and in the essence of getting to 100 with my good friend Dean, I'm doing it from the front seat of my car in a car park. That is not a real cyclist behind me. It is a picture, so don't worry about that person. Focus. But good afternoon and welcome, mate. Number 94. We're almost there. It's getting exciting.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, absolutely. We are setting ourselves up for success by calling out that we're heading towards our episode number 100 by the end of the year, which is super exciting. But today we're going to jump in and have a chat about the Netwealth research. So every year they do this Advice Tech Research Report. And so the goal is that we're breaking down some of the things that we've learned and observed through that report as we go through and break it down. And I'm going to talk about a few of the sections, and then you're going to give us your 20 cents worth in terms of what you've been noticing in the advice practices that you talk to.
Hey, Dean, like this report is actually surveying advisors, so it's real life issues in real with what actually is going on.
Absolutely, yep. Indeed. So we'll jump into the first element of what was observed through the report. Obviously, if you haven't seen the report, you have to go to the Netwealth website to download it, but we'll put the link and stuff in the show notes as well. Essentially, the first theme of what's come through is the data, turning data into action as a theme. And so this is the first element that we wanted to chat about. And so from our perspective, when we think about this data, is we're getting to the point where it's very important to have all of your client and business information talking to one another. And so in the past, we've had these situations where you go into Xplan and you get some information, then you go into your platform provider, get a little bit more information, and then go somewhere else, get a little bit more information, and try to pull that together. What we're talking about from a client perspective when we think about the data is working out how we're bringing all of that data into one spot for us to see, but also more importantly for the client to be able to see that as well, or know that we're making decisions off all of that joint data. And so that data into action for us really is pushing the advice practices into the use of dashboards. I was explaining this yesterday to someone that Xplan's a really good tool in one silo to look at one client's information. So it will have all the client information, but it's not necessarily the best tool to look over your entire client base and identify missing data or identify trends and information across your entire client book. And so what's happening is there's a rise of the need for building the dashboard that can tell stories with data about what's going on at the business level overall. And that's going to help make better business decisions overall and give advisors access to the information that they know they need to have access to, but haven't always had that level of visibility at the practice level.
So, Dave, so you're talking about getting them a dashboard, not necessarily like I get the client piece, but are you then referring in that part to a dashboard that actually has all the business metrics and stuff as well? That is
absolutely. So this is and it could the technology tool might be a Power BI report, or it might be partnering with a couple of different external companies. Like we know has Zeppo and Hub24 has a Hub Connect tool as two that I know of, and both of those tools are taking the really complicated data that's AdvisorLogic or Xplan, all of that CRM data, and start to translate it into data that the business can make decisions off. And so if you went to one particular advisor and said, what's your top 5 clients by revenue? They most probably can rattle that off. Okay. But if you start asking more complicated questions, where what's your top 5 clients by revenue and postcode, or revenue and age, or what is the clients that are about to have their 60th birthday and things like that. And we can do all of that in Xplan. You can generate reports like that. But what it requires is in the past is someone with Xplan and Excel skills to start to break up that. Whereas what we're talking about with the element of dashboards is we're putting the power of this sort of micro analytics into the advisor hand or into the business owner hand. And so as a result of that, they can do this kind of research constantly on all of the data within the business to make decisions. So,
Yeah, and
as
it's
and
much
when
easier, isn't it?
it's much easier,
Yeah.
absolutely, because it's all connected up. And then when you start working towards this goal, then you start working towards getting all of your data coordinated in one spot. And becomes one of your decisions when you're thinking about what new technology I might plug into my business.
Yeah.
I have to therefore be able to use that new tool, but also have that information come back into a central location so we can use it for our analytics.
Yeah, I think, Dean, just on that, I know that our CRM, we like internally for the business, not for the advisors, but for me personally, was Salesforce. And I had the ability to create a dashboard in there which could draw out of all the information that was sitting in Salesforce. Which you're right. If someone said to me, like, how many compliance reviews are happening this month, I could go and run that report, but it would take time. But when I set up a dash had metrics on it that were important to me, you can actually just go to that dashboard and it's almost instantaneous if the reporting's right and yeah. But I think for financial advice firms, the thing I see is they've all got obviously some version of a CRM or data type of thing, but some of the data's a bit garbagey. And so I think that to get where you are wanting people to go with this, which is spot on, it's like this garbage in is garbage out, right? And so it's that time, I guess, to cleanse that data to make sure it's spot on to then let this technology take through.
Absolutely. And the best way to cleanse your data is to actually look at it in a dashboard. So it's really hard
Yep.
to go through a
Okay. Yep.
client file in Xplan and go, oh, I wonder what's missing. And so I've got to click on all the fields to work out what's missing. Whereas when you translate that into a dashboard, then you can start to build what would be called like a what's missing dashboard. And you can look for the exemptions or you can look for the missing fields of data. So really simply, like if you said date of birth, you go, which clients don't have date of birth in Xplan? It would be really hard to go through and search every single Xplan
Yeah.
file. But the moment you're extracting the data and you can tell stories with data, which is what a dashboard is, then you can actually generate a report that's on the screen every single day, which is the clients that don't have date of birth. Or you would get much more technical than that in terms of the information you might want to extract. And this is about cleaning up your data. So your data needs to be really clean in order to make great decisions. So that means
Yep.
archiving clients that are not clients anymore. It means getting the quality of each client file up to 100% so that when advisors are looking at it in a dashboard, it's actually real up-to-date and quality information. And it's not just Xplan. It's Xplan and Hub24 or your product provider, Netwealth, for example. It's your CRM, it's your emails, it's your SharePoint files, it's all of the places where there's data, objectively trying to pull it all together to get to a great dashboard. So the data into action is cleaning up and organizing this data, but then being into the point where you can create some decisions around it from that perspective. And that leads us, Craig, on to the next one, because it's what do you do with the data and what are clients and businesses expecting to do with the data? And the category in here is data-driven personalization. And so we just talked about the data. So the only way you can personalize stuff is if you have the data or a human that knows everything about the client. But we want to be able to do data because data means that you can look after more clients. And so personalization is
Yep.
really important. The concepts that we're really experienced in receiving as all people is that every time we mention I'm thinking about buying a particular product, it's all then on your Instagram feed or your favorite social feed, whatever that might be. That's an element of personalization. And that's personalization in terms of ads, but also we've got the ability, once we've got this data, to do a really good job in personalizing the client experience. And that is what people are now expecting in their journey with a financial advisor. We have the most amount of information on a client than any other professional service provider. And so as a result of that, we should be able to use that information for good in terms of
Yeah.
personalizing the journey from a client perspective in the work that we do. And so this getting the data organized to then think about your client book, not as I look after 150 clients, but we're actually starting to go, I look after all these different sub communities of clients, and I create content, advice opportunities, or information for these little micro groups. And then you've got to be able to talk to those micro groups within your own business at different times and separately. So the idea that you're sending out a newsletter is great, but imagine if you had really good data, you could then customize the newsletter, just as one example, to your 6 different subcategories of clients. And so they're getting information from you, which is absolutely personalized, as opposed to just large and generic through that process.
I think the bravery involved shift. Like, this is that moment in time where you don't always have to run a financial advice business how a financial business has always been run. You've got new tools, you've got new data, you've got new categories. The days of gold, silver, bronze, A, B, C, that type of stuff, it's almost being left behind with the levels of things we've got, information we've got now, and the way that we can interpret it. But it's still, I think, historically people get a bit stuck. And so it's that moment to go, you know what, be a bit brave. Think about how you want to categorize your clients. Think about how you want to deal with them. I like your comments around micro segments. And then think about what you actually communicate about to them to enhance your profile, enhance your brand, enhance your service.
Absolutely. So that's number 2. That's number 2, Craig, on this particular list of things that we're thinking about and Netwealth have researched. So the third one is this concept called automation across the advice lifecycle is their heading. And so what this obviously is the start of the speeding up of processes and execution of processes by virtue of automation. And so the interesting thing from here is that I don't want us to think about automation in terms of moving a job that was done internally to the client. Okay, so the category here that I see a lot of is like online fact finding. Okay, so that is automation when you look at it from your business, that, I don't have to enter my client's date of birth in the system anymore. But actually what you've done is you've just shifted the job to somebody else, and the client is now entering their own date of birth and other things like that. Now, that might be a desired business state because it reduces the errors, but it's not necessarily automation because we're just getting someone else to do the same work manually. Okay. So when I want us to think about what jobs can we automate, this is actually starting to go, how can I use current or future technology to cut out steps in my internal process to speed it up? Okay. And so a couple of examples that we know that's happening at the moment is, if you think about the booking engine, bookings or Calendly, that's doing that first part of the process of finding a great time for the client to meet with you. Now, you might argue that's moving the job from there, but the automation happens after the meeting's booked. And so that's all about making sure that actually when the meeting's booked, we collect that data, we're sending confirmations, and workflows start as soon as a meeting is booked. And so the automations that I know that we're looking at the moment is that once a client books a meeting with an advisor, immediately that goes into a Microsoft list, and using Power Automate, which is part of the Microsoft world, we're actually starting workflows off that particular calendar booking. And so that's a version of automation, because what we're doing at that point is not having to think about what needs to happen straight after a client is booked. We're actually starting that workflow immediately. And so this element of automation, the goal there is to try to take steps out of the process, our internal process, without moving the work to a client.
Yep. So Dean, to get there though, is that something where you've got the whole firm together to plan that out so everyone's on board and everyone knows what's going to happen and where it's going to go?
Absolutely. So my whole thing with technology is, you go, theoretically, there's lots of things we can do. The problem is the problem and challenge is the change management around it. And that goes for everything that comes through this report. the objective here is to say, given we want to take a few steps out of the process, we need to train the team to follow a particular process, and that might be changing. And what is highlighted through this process for us is that it's all good and well to say the process kicks off once a calendar invitation is booked. But if the client if an associate or an advisor books the meeting themselves, the process is broken. And so what we actually had to do is train the internal staff that if they happen to book a meeting for a client directly, that they still use the tools to kick off the workflow. And so the only way that you can get that happening is in that context of change management, is that we teach everyone what the new way is. And then we obviously keep teaching the new way, because people will fall into their old habits relatively quickly. The moment they get slightly busy, or they're busy in a rush, or some other things are happening within the business, often that means that we default back to the process in our head versus the process in the business.
Yeah, no, that's I think a great example. Now, I don't know if am I delayed or am I coming through okay? Because
You're coming through okay. There's a little bit of a delay, but don't worry.
Right.
Your questions are coming through, and it's working relatively well. And everyone can see and hear you. Don't worry. So the fourth one, Craig. The fourth one, Craig, is AI going mainstream. So just obviously in their data of how many advisors are starting to adopt AI and bring within the business, it's starting to go mainstream, which is obviously the number of users are increasing through this process. And so what's happening, obviously, at that point in time is that everyone has finished with probably like the dabbling of AI and starting to realize that they need to invest time in actually getting consistency around it. And so what we're seeing through that process is probably more that you're going, okay, I've got a couple of tools, hopefully one, but I might have one or two tools that I'm using, and I'm actually making sure that I'm constantly using those tools and no longer looking for alternatives first and foremost. And we've got the adoption of the team using it on an ongoing basis. And I think the team, if you think about the team side of it, what's happened over the last little while is that there's Microsoft Copilot, which everyone would have heard of, and definitely if they've spoken to me, they've heard of it. But there's two versions of it. There's what I call the paid version, which is about $500 a year. That's Microsoft Copilot. They have another version called Copilot Chat. That Copilot Chat is actually accessible to everyone that has a Microsoft 365 license. So pretty well everyone that's watching today has access to this one anyway. And the quality of that one is actually getting better and better. And so this is something that's free, i.e. provided within your license, but the quality of it and the access to it's getting better within the practices, so that everyone in the organization now is actually able to use AI across Word documents and across Excel and things like that. Not all corporate data, but when you're in a file. And so now we're at the point where everyone can use it. So we need to increase the level of training. So we've gone from adoption to now training, because now these tools are not just in the advisor hand. 12 months ago, the advisor was the only one that had paid for the license. And so they were going, yeah, we save time because of file notes, and saving time because of file notes I should say that 15,000 of the 15,000 advisors should be saving time with AI file notes and meeting summaries as it stands today. But now we're in the second level of the adoption, that all of the staff within the businesses can actually be using these tools to make their day-to-day jobs easier as well.
Someone listening that hasn't adopted AI yet, or like a Copilot into their practice, is there something that you'd recommend they start? Put file notes aside. I know people are trying file notes and all. There's something else business-wise that you'd say, if you want to dip your toe in, here's the first thing I'd try to put the smile on their dial, I guess, when they see how well it works?
Yeah. So breaking it down into the two halves. So I'm a very big fan of Microsoft. So that we'll take that as the first step in how I'm answering this question. So if
Feel
you
free to
if
send
you
him a
have,
laptop if you're listening.
oh yeah, there's no product placement here, but
No product
me and
placement.
everyone else. I've never had cash for comments, Craig, and so I don't know if it's coming anytime soon. However, the paid, if you think about from the context of if you're paying for the Copilot license and want to give that a go, the idea of helping me prepare for XYZ is really interesting. So if you were to jump in on any one day, just before any one meeting, internal or external, and you say, help me prepare for my meeting with Craig Kamanis tomorrow. And because you paid for it, it's got the context of every email and communication you've had with Craig Kamanis. It's going to tell you something. And based on that, you can iterate that of going, what have I missed? What have I not delivered? What should I be aware of ahead of that meeting? And so that's a really good exercise to do for anyone that has these licenses, that where the license has access to your company data. Oh, Craig's mobile phone has dropped out. So we'll see if he pops back in a second. Here he comes. So you're back, Craig Kamanis. He obviously got a phone call.
No, I don't know what happened. It just dropped out. But anyway.
That's okay. So the paid version of Copilot will allow you to answer that question, which is a great way to start, notwithstanding the file note side of it. Start with asking those questions and getting the content off the back of that. If you're an employee within the advice practice and you've got access to these tools, what I'd actually say is start to use the online version of Word and Excel. You're in Word or Excel in the browser. You can click Copilot chat up in the right-hand corner. The Copilot therefore has access to the content of that particular document that's open in your browser and start to ask questions of that document. Very high level. What have I missed? What's confusing in this document? What could I rewrite in this document to make it more user-friendly for someone to read? Or if you're in Microsoft Excel, you're asking it to write formulas. The quality of formulas that you can write today is unlimited. All you need to be able to do is explain what you're trying to achieve with data in Excel, and it's going to suggest and iterate formulas for you. So it may not get it right the first time. Simply tell the Copilot the error that you've had, and it's actually going to fix the errors that it notices along the way as well. So for those people that haven't given it a go, the tool is right there available to staff to jump in and do it. And empowering your staff to give these things a go is really important, because half your staff are already dabbling. They just haven't told you because you haven't given them permission to play in the tools, or you haven't given them the rule as to which tools should be used. And so it's really important to know that if you have a staff member that's, say, less than 40 in your practice, they're already using AI in your practice without you specifically telling them to do it. They're probably already dabbling in it. And so that's a number 5, which we're about to get to in terms of cybersecurity. One of the big issues to do there, but we've got to empower our teams to have a go through this process.
Definitely, mate. That's good advice. And yeah, it's incredible now what is being able to be done, isn't it? It's just
indeed.
It's mind-blowing.
Okay, so we'll jump on to number 5. We'll jump on to number 5. And the two things around this is the heading is trust and cybersecurity are non-negotiable. So obviously the theme here is pretty standard ongoing issue that we have within our practices in relation to cybersecurity. So we know we have the most data available to our financial planning practices. So we need to be aware that we've got a huge amount of data when it comes to financial planning businesses. And on top of that, we have to be aware that generally speaking, our standards need to increase in and around the quality of AI that we have cybersecurity within our business. So if you haven't gone through this process, I think it's really key that we actually start the process of engaging with our cybersecurity overall. Craig's phone died because it got too hot down in Adelaide at 38 degrees in the car park. So that has happened. So definitely making sure that we're aware of our cybersecurity obligations. There's obviously the few legal cases that are happening with ASIC in relation to bring it forward. So the writing is on the wall that ASIC feels like AFSLs are needing to look at cybersecurity for their practices and are somewhat responsible. So how that's going to flow down is that AFSLs are going to start to mandate cyber-related checks and balances in terms of the individual firms, obviously mandating and requiring cyber insurance as part of that process and cyber training as part of that process. We've had Fraser Jack on the podcast before, and he's obviously really focused on making sure advisors are doing cyber training, cyber drills, and actually building their cyber resilience in terms of processes within the practices as well, and doing that role play or actual doing a cyber drill to make sure things are happening through that process as well. And the last one, bringing it all together a little bit as well, but this idea of a connected data backbone, as Netwealth have put it, what does that actually mean? Is that making sure, as I hinted with the dashboarding, is that we need to make sure that all of our data can talk to one another over time and actually have it all in one place. And so the people love the buzzwords here is the data warehouse or the data lake. But what it actually is as an outcome, when we think about it as business owners, is actually having all of the data that's available to our business coming into one location so that we can actually leverage that over time to make business decisions. And so in the Netwealth report, page 53 of 56, it's got a picture in terms of what Netwealth are doing in the previous Xeppo, now Unify concept or tool that they've built, but actually making sure that we're getting the data into at one place by pulling information in. So you're pulling Xplan, you're pulling maybe your accounting software, you're pulling obviously your product provider software in there as well, to have all of that in one place to leverage, to make all of those dashboards, to do that visualization and to know what's going on in the practice. So having that professional finger on the pulse from your business perspective is what we think about when it comes to getting all of our data in one place. So practices can do this on their own, obviously, or they can seek out different partners that will actually help them pull the data together and help run that back end. Why you might consider the latter is more around their ability to build robust data connections, which in the future would mean that the ability for your robust solution to connect to other third parties is going to be better than if you try to build it all yourself and then you're stuck trying to negotiate with vendors and things like that. It's a good consideration on just then thinking about how you build your data or go about actually coordinating and bringing all of your data into one place. So those are the 6 trends in terms of the work. There's obviously a section, if I plug myself, there's a section of AI prompts, which is really key, that I was mentioned in the report as well. So you can take a look at that to give you an idea of how you structure the prompting that you give your AI through that process. So there's a few good sections in there as well, that being one of them. But the link to the report will be on the notes. I'll put it into LinkedIn. It'll come out in the system as well. But obviously you can just Google it, or you've already seen it through this process as well. So I think from there, if you've got any questions, please reach out. If you need to know a little bit more about Microsoft and the AI Copilot from that perspective, I think it's really, really valuable. And so if I get some comments on that, we might do another UncommonCents episode that focuses on that and a few case studies as well, just to give our listeners some examples of that as well. So awesome. Thanks very much. Sorry that Craig's phone died in the car park. He missed the end of the day, but thanks for listening. And we look forward to sharing time with you on episode 94 next week. Cheers.